of the things that make AirlineSim unique is its online reservation system, the ORS, as you know it, which generates billions of connections every day to distribute to virtual passengers on the millions of flights our players offer in the game worlds. And when you think of AirlineSim, you probably think of running an airline, operating an airline, but we are convinced that it's equally important, if not more important, in the real world to actually sell the capacity you're generating. So what we want to focus on with the AS Technology Demonstrator is this whole aspect of distribution systems, interlining, booking classes, revenue management, all of these aspects that real-world airlines use to differentiate themselves from their competitors. And at the same time, because AirlineSim at the end of the day is a game, right? It's supposed to be fun. So we want to give a lot more control to the players about how they run their airlines, how they design their airlines, and what they can do with their airlines. What it's not going to be is a full-fledged game. So this is intended as a prototype. We want to see how far we can take the distribution system. We want to see how many virtual bookings we can generate every single day. We have to see what the technological limits are. So this is what this prototype is focusing on. It is going to offer the core game loop. You're going to be able to schedule some sort of flight plan for your airline. You're going to be able to set up the prices, the fares, all of these things that are important to the distribution system. But not much beyond that. So you will not find an aircraft performance system, for example. You won't even have to compete for slots. And you might find this surprising, but you won't even have cargo in the game. So we're just going to focus on this passenger distribution, reservation systems, inventory systems, these kind of aspects in this first prototype, which we call AirlineSim Technology Demonstrator. The goal of the AirlineSim Technology Demonstrator really is to address some of the not really very obvious but true underlying design issues that we have with the current generation of AirlineSim. While the ORS is great and it is unique, and at the time it came out it was absolutely novel, and still to this day is something that no other airline simulation game can offer, it still has some pretty tremendous shortcomings in that it really only knows 3 types of passengers. It knows economy passengers, business passengers, and first passengers. And all of these passengers, they share exactly the same desires. They have the same preferences when it comes to booking their flights. And what this means is that all of the airlines in AirlineSim essentially compete for the same kind of passenger, which means all of the airlines necessarily have to look pretty much identical. And in many AirlineSim game worlds, people are not actually competing for the passengers at the end of the day. They're competing for slots and other resources in the game more than for what you think they're actually doing. So with the technology demonstrator and with the intense focus on this distribution system, we want to finally solve this problem by generating a essentially infinite amount of different types of passengers, with each having their individual preferences as to what they are looking for in their transport connections, and also at the same time kind of giving the players a lot more tools to actually satisfy those requests. So there's a lot of things that are really important in the real world that at the moment AirlineSim does not even model. Like, for example, that you have to book a flight a certain time in advance, or that you have to have a minimum stay of a week at some destination, and these kind of aspects that are extremely important in the real world, but don't show up in AirlineSim at all. So the goal of AirlineSim Technology Demonstrator is really to get these elements into the game, to make them meaningful, to give players the ability to, for example, decide to play a low-cost carrier just the way they exist in the real world, while at the same time allowing players to play something like a full service network carrier, also like in the real world. These things coexist. There should be different models of running an airline that are possible. And that essentially, at the end of the day, in essence, is the goal of the technology demonstrator, to prove that this is possible while maintaining this core feature that makes AirlineSim AirlineSim. Quite obviously, the heart of the technology demonstrator will be the new distribution system, which is the part of the game that actually takes the booking requests and distributes them, as the name suggests, among the flights and connections that exist in the game world. But obviously those requests have to come from somewhere, so an important part of the project and the prototype is actually the system that generates the initial booking requests, which is going to be a lot more sophisticated than what we have right now. And that essentially is the core. And around this core, what we're doing or what we're building is a completely new UI from scratch. We've learned a lot over the past few years in terms of UI design and building flexible designs for complex games in the browser. So that is going to be the first visible part. That's where the magic happens, so to speak. And then within this framework, we are going to build the most essential features that you need to experience the new distribution system. So there is going to be, of course, some kind of scheduling functionality. You have to be able to set up your airline schedule. But there's also going to be the first basic versions of fare management, of booking class or inventory management rather. There's going to be, of course, some basic set of informational databases. So you have to find airports, you have to find where to fly to. There's going to be some station management, so you can set up your stations just like you did in the current version of AirlineSim. And a handful of utility things that you just need to do what you should be able to do in this early, very much limited prototype. AirlineSim as a project was founded in January 2002. So if you do the math, you'll realize that in 2022, this project is going to be a whopping 20 years old. And from a technological point of view, the current version of AirlineSim that you play today actually has its root in first technical prototypes that were written 15, 16, maybe even 17 years ago, depending on how you count. So the project as a whole is old. The technology that it uses is old, and of course the technology we use today is based on assumptions we made back then, and it's based on the technological environment of the time. We had a lot slower servers. Back then, we didn't even have STDs. We had spinning disks in our servers. And so a lot of things developed over the years, including us. So we gained a lot more experience, both in terms of development, but also in terms of what aviation looks like and what airline distribution looks like. All these kind of things are coming together. And with this important milestone of 20 years coming up, we just thought it now is the time to kind of decide where we want to take AirlineSim going forward. So we're obviously going to want to continue AirlineSim, but how do we want to do it? And then there happened to be this great funding program by the German government who want to support game development in Germany. So there's these two things coming together, which kind of created the perfect situation for us to say, okay, you know what? Now is the perfect time to write this prototype, a greenfield prototype, to really explore and to really experiment with what's possible and what we can do, and hopefully create a foundation for the things to come in the next 20 years. If you are a long-time AirlineSim player, you might remember that a few years ago we had something in the works that sounds very similar to what I'm describing right now. And that was the booking classes and diverse passenger types. And yes, on paper, this project was supposed to address and hopefully solve the same problems that the distribution system is supposed to solve. But at the time, while we were even at the point where we announced the feature and had a rough timeline for its release, it never saw the light of the day. And the reasons for that are plentiful. So first of all, we kind of had it in the back of our minds, we wanted to keep this backwards compatible. Like, we were really afraid of kind of putting the existing version of AirlineSim aside and starting something new from scratch, because then what would happen to all these old game worlds? And so we didn't want to do that, so we built this new booking class feature with backwards compatibility in mind. And that of course limited tremendously what we could do with it. And another aspect was that this suddenly introduced a lot of new complexity into the game that wasn't there before. So we had a lot of UI and user experience struggles in how do we present this? How do we suddenly put all of those booking classes into the existing route management interfaces and things like that. And last but not least, we never really got it to work quite right from a technological point of view. So it just, we ran into performance issues, we ran into architecture issues. So this whole project just never made it past the finishing line. So, and the distribution system that we're building now as part of the technology demonstrator, because it is built from scratch on the green field without any legacy baggage that it has to take care of. We can use the latest technologies. We can build this stuff up from scratch with a clear vision and with a clear design from the get-go, which really makes us confident that this time we're actually going to be able to reach our goals and to crack those design nuts that we failed to crack in the past. There is of course still a chance that this might fail. Like there is a non-zero chance that during the early prototyping phase, which is starting right now, but which is intended to take place primarily in the beginning of next year, that we realize, hey, it doesn't work. Like there are just some things that we can't make work, or there are certain technological limits that just physically prevent us from doing what we want to do. And in such a case, if that happens, we are going to say, yeah, tough luck. This is not going to happen. But at this point right now, we're super confident that we are going to be able to realize our vision of a next generation airline simulation game that you've never seen before. If you're watching this and you are a long-time player of AirlineSim, maybe one of those people that actually started in 2007 and are playing the same airline since this day, then of course you are probably worried what is going to happen with AirlineSim as we know it today. What is happening to all our game worlds? Are we shutting them down? If those questions are floating around your head, then I can tell you right now, rest assured, nothing is going to happen to these game worlds. Quite the opposite. We intend to keep on operating those game worlds for the foreseeable future. As long as there are people playing them, they are going to stay online. Not only that, but we're also intending to keep up our schedule of launching new game worlds, both in terms of unlimited or open-ended game worlds and time-limited game worlds. There are going to be data patches, there are going to be maintenance patches. So all in all, everything is going to continue to operate as you're used to. But obviously our development focus is going to be on the technology demonstrator for the time being. But that is pretty much the only caveat here in terms of day-to-day operations of AirlineSim, you won't notice any major change, except maybe a lot more communication from our side. We have set ourselves a pretty tight schedule for the Technology Demonstrator project, which is based on two cornerstones. One is the mid-2022 date at which we want to launch into a open development phase. And the second one is mid-2023, when the overall project is supposed to be finished. We are basically starting right now, all the way until early 2022, in working on the theoretical foundation and the technological foundation of the distribution system. So this is going to be a closed explorative development phase in which we try to figure out the technological limits to what we want to do, come up with the game design, with the design of all the formulas, all the systems, all the parameters, all of these things that kind of define that core that I've talked about earlier. And as soon as that phase has been successfully concluded, we are going to move into development of the actual game, of the actual playable prototype. And we are going to do this in a very similar fashion to how the AirlineSim project started originally back in January 2022, in 2002, when we really gave access to anyone who was interested the very moment you were able to log in. And that was basically the only feature that existed. You could log in, you can create your airline, and that was it. And then we were constantly adding new features that you could basically lay your hand on the very moment they became available. And we are planning a very similar development style to that during the prototype phase. So ideally several updates a week. We'll see how it goes. So that is the general timeline for the Technology Demonstrator project. So with all the things that I've talked about so far, what does all of this mean for the future of AirlineSim in the long run? What is going to happen after the Technology Demonstrator project? And to put it simply, our idea obviously is that once the prototype is finished and we receive feedback from the community that what we have done is cool and that you like it, and that what we set out to do actually works and we're successful in achieving our goals with this prototype, then obviously we want to take this prototype and develop it into a full-blown product, an AirlineSim 2, if you will. So a successor, a true successor, written from scratch for the current generation of AirlineSim. That is the general idea. That obviously depends on quite a few factors that lie in the future, and they're hard to predict. So it's going to depend on financials, it's going to depend on the team, it's going to depend on how our other projects are doing. And I mean, ideally, what we would love to be able to do would be at some point add more development resources to AirlineSim beyond what we have now. And that might actually be unavoidable. But as I said, these are things that lie in the future. Just if you want to take one thing away from this, is that the plan is to develop AirlineSim going forward in one way or another. So AirlineSim has finished 20 years now, and the idea is that we want to go for at least another 20 years. So this is what we've set out to do. If you want to stay in the loop about all of this, then please make sure to hit the subscribe button. I never thought I would say that, but there we are. So because we're going to put out more video content over the years. Also, of course, read our blog. RSS feeds are available. You can follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. Please feel free to join us in the discussion on the forums. Check out our Discord server. So there's plenty of channels available to get in touch with us and to stay in the loop about the latest developments. And of course, make sure that your AirlineSim account has a valid email address, because then we're also going to send out newsletters with the most important things you need to know about existing AirlineSim, but also about all the things to come in relation to the technology demonstrator, and of course beyond that. So thanks a lot, and see you on all those channels.